Rebecca Thissen, Belgian Climate Coalition and member of the Climate Action Network in Europe. Tell us more about this situation and the solutions to finance the Green Deal.
Bonjour, merci de m'accueillir et de m'avoir invité.
Hello, thank you for your greeting and thank you for having invited me. I wanted to talk about the climate bank, but Pierre took that away from me, so I would like to mention some of the dimensions that were not brought up on perhaps the more universal aspect of the climate crisis. I think that it's important to remember, and Wendell just said, that it's important to say that we are not on the right path. So this is a rather simple slide that's showing what is being done and what was decided in Paris in 2015, so not so long ago. And it shows that this is still insufficient when it comes to the climate goals that we must meet. So the limit of 2 degrees and ideally 1.5 degrees. So what the politicians are saying is one thing, but what is actually being done is taking us towards a minimum of 2 degrees of an increase, and that's still not good enough. So the scientists and the science is quite clear on this. I think that for more than a year and a half, young people have been complaining about this, and more than many politicians. The numbers are here, the path is clear, and if there's one more thing that's important to mention today, it is the importance of the report on climate, on global warming, that shows what it would take to reduce the increase to 1.5%, and it mentions the importance of accomplishing a decarbonized society by 2015. So we have quite a lot to do, and we must do it today. We must not wait. There's also something very important to mention, and that is the fact that there's a fundamental difference between the limit of 1.5 degree and the 2 degrees. There's actually a massive gap in the consequences if the temperature rises to 1.5, or if we continue on the path towards 2 degrees. There are social implications such as immigration, population displacement, economic consequences as well, and of course there are massive environmental consequences. Extreme climate events will increase all over the planet. Another dimension that I think hasn't been mentioned sufficiently today is the international dimension of global warming, and particularly the difference between the northern and southern countries. Of course, that is a very generic name, and current conjecture and evolutions mean that we must change this, but the northern countries are historical emitters and enjoyed and benefited from the industrial revolution. They have a responsibility to deal with the climate crisis that we're facing, but because they were able to develop faster and more, they have a greater capacity and means to assist the countries in the south who are paying for the climate change that we've experienced. So that is climate injustice. On one hand, you could imagine it as a big boat. Yes, global warming affects all of us, all over the planet, but we can say that the rich countries and the developed countries are in first class, whereas the vulnerable countries are below decks, and they won't have access to our different safety measures. So we mentioned the issues where that is concerned in North-South, but there are also social inequalities to think about. We don't have the same capacities and resilience if we are wealthy as compared to those who are less well off. So with that fundamental fact, Europe has a role as a climate leader and really must be a driver when it comes to leading for those other leaders who might be more skeptical towards climate change, such as Brazil or the United States, and who are not making all of the effort that they need to make to stop the climate crisis. Europe really must play a leading role. So in 2017 alone, the European Union had to pay 17 billion euros for the consequences of climate change, and this will cost even more in terms of the overall GDP if we leave climate change to continue on its current path. So what should we do? There is good news for all of us, and that is the fact that this transition, this fair transition towards a decarbonized society, is a massive opportunity. It's a challenge that we must all meet, but we should see it as an opportunity when it comes to healthcare, dealing with inequalities that I've mentioned, in employment. There are so many possibilities, but on the other hand, of course, we've said that it will be very expensive. There are significant means that will be required to finance the transition. We talked about the famous trillion euros that will be required. And another issue is that when it comes to the Paris Agreement, we need financial flows that are compatible with a low-carbon development. So it's very important to know that the money already exists, but it is invested in the wrong way and in a way that contradicts the goal that we would like to accomplish. So we need to review current investments. Another important point, of course, is that climate policies must also be social policies, and there should be no question of the climate policies that we are contemplating costing or weighing on those of us who are marginalized or underprivileged. So with that in mind, what should we do? Here, I would like to talk about what we support in our coalition. Pierre was very clear on this, so I won't go on about it, but there are two different pillars. First, Bank for the Climate that would fall under the EIB. And there's also the element of the place that social society can have. And young people are the proof of this. Very often we go into the streets. In my job every day, we go towards politicians and we try to talk about these things, but often big decisions are made behind closed doors in a place where there is no inclusion. But we need to make sure that the actions that we take include citizens, experts, and NGOs. That's the kind of decision-making that we need for the future. And then parallel to that, the second pillar is very important because we need so much money. So we need a fund that will allow us to mobilize all of the money that will be required and also assist the most vulnerable countries. There are also many other solutions, national solutions, European solutions, but I brought this up here because I think that we have an important role as a European Union, but of course there are many more actions to be taken. So I need to leave you right now, but thank you so much for having listened.